My name is Laverne Rutledge, and I'm 29 years old. If you asked anyone in my family who the reliable one was, they wouldn't hesitate. They'd say my name like it was a job title instead of a person. Laverne handles things. Laverne figures it out. Laverne will make it work. I didn't choose that role. It settled on me slowly, year after year, the way dust collects on furniture no one ever moves. At some point, everyone just assumes it belongs there. I was the one who picked up late night calls, the one who sent birthday cards on time, the one who answered the phone at 2 a.m. without asking why first. Somewhere along the way, being dependable stopped being appreciated and started being expected. My parents like to describe our family as close, and on the surface, we were. Holiday dinners, group chats, smiling photos that made us look functional. But closeness, I learned, can sometimes be another word for control. They had a habit of deciding things for me, big things, life things, always dressed up as concern or unity or what's best for everyone. And because I didn't push back early enough, they learned something dangerous. My silence could be used as consent. My younger sister, Cassie, was the opposite of me in almost every way. Where I planned, she improvised. Where I saved, she borrowed. Where I absorbed pressure quietly, she scattered it everywhere. Cassie could fail classes, max out credit cards, borrow money from half the family, and still get praise for trying her best. She showed up late to dinners, with new hair, a new plan, and no consequences. People called her free-spirited. I was called mature. That difference shaped everything. The moment it finally cracked didn't happen during a fight. It didn't happen during a screaming match or a dramatic confession. It happened at a brunch that was so ordinary, it almost felt insulting in hindsight. Bland eggs, over-poured mimosas, the same 5 family stories retold like tradition required it. We were crowded around the patio table at my parents' house. Me, Cassie, Mom, Dad, and Aunt Isla, who barely spoke but somehow always knew when something important was happening. I had barely touched my plate when my mom smiled and said, in that cheerful, matter-of-fact tone she used, when decisions were already made, "We're just so relieved Cassie will be staying with you for a while." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Cassie didn't even look at me. She chimed in like this was common knowledge. "Yeah, I'll take the spare room. I'll probably start moving my stuff next weekend." No question, no pause, no acknowledgement that I was sitting right there. Dad nodded, adding punctuation to the sentence. "She needs a fresh start, Laverne, and it's not like you use that space for anything important. Family sticks together." I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because my body hadn't caught up to what my mind was realizing yet. I chewed a dry piece of toast and kept my face neutral. My heart wasn't racing with anger. It was heavy, quiet, the way it gets when you realize a line has been crossed so many times it's faded out of existence. No one had asked me, not once. They talked around me, over me, past me, like my apartment was a shared resource and my life was a calendar they could write on in pencil. Cassie pulled up Pinterest boards for decorating her room. Mom talked about grocery lists. Dad joked about how it would be good for me to have company again. They didn't notice that I never confirmed anything. They didn't ask when I'd be home. They didn't ask if I was okay with it. They didn't even look at me. What they didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that I had moved out of that apartment 3 weeks earlier. Not on a whim, not dramatically. I'd planned it quietly for months. The lease was ending, and I took the opportunity to downsize. A smaller place across town. Closer to work. More light. Fewer expectations. No spare room waiting to be claimed. I hadn't told my parents. Part of me wanted something that was just mine. A space that didn't come with obligations or backup plans attached. I was still technically paying through the end of the month, and the lease was still in my name for another week, but I hadn't stepped foot in that apartment since I carried out the last box. Sitting there at that table, listening to them divide up my space like it was already theirs, something settled into place. They genuinely believed they had the right to decide my boundaries. They thought my silence meant yes. They thought my reliability meant access. They thought I was a resource, not a person. I excused myself early, saying I had errands to run. My mom barely looked up from her plate. Cassie waved absently, already texting someone else. I walked to my car in a haze and sat there for several minutes without turning the engine on. No music, no phone calls, just breathing. There's a certain kind of clarity that shows up when something inside you snaps, not in rage, but in resolve. I felt it then, settling in my chest, like a decision I hadn't consciously made yet. That week, I didn't say anything. I didn't remind them I didn't live there anymore. I didn't correct my mom when she texted me a grocery list for Cassie's arrival. I didn't respond when my dad sent a thumbs up emoji to an article about teaching responsibility to adult children. I didn't object when Cassie asked if she could bring a cat just for a few weeks. I watched it unfold. Every message was phrased like an update, not a request. Every assumption reinforced the same truth. They weren't asking me for help. They were assigning me a role. And that made what came next feel inevitable. Because when people are used to you always showing up, the first time you don't, it feels like betrayal to them, even when it isn't. Even when it's just you finally choosing yourself. The day Cassie was supposed to move in landed on a Saturday. Of course it did. I woke up early out of habit, not anxiety. There was no knot in my stomach, no rush to check my phone, just sunlight creeping through the blinds of my new apartment. The quiet hum of a place that didn't yet feel haunted by expectations. I made coffee. I watered the basil plant on the windowsill. I told myself, calmly, almost clinically, that whatever happened today was no longer my responsibility. Around noon, curiosity got the better of me. I drove past the old apartment. I didn't park. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. Cassie's little white car was double parked on the street, trunk wide open. Boxes were stacked unevenly on the sidewalk like props in a poorly rehearsed play. Cassie stood beside them, phone pressed to her ear, holding a plastic container filled with makeup or jewelry or both. She looked annoyed. Not worried, not confused, annoyed, like someone who'd been mildly inconvenienced, not blindsided. I kept driving. The image followed me anyway. Later that afternoon, I checked the building's security camera feed. I still had login access, another loose end I hadn't bothered to tie up yet. The footage picked her up clearly. Cassie buzzing the door, buzzing again, pacing, sitting on one of her suitcases. She called me first, then Mom, then Dad. Then, judging by how long she stayed there, probably every contact she had left. I didn't answer. I turned my phone off and went out for coffee. There's something surreal about choosing a pastry while your family is unraveling several blocks away. I remember stirring my drink slowly, watching the foam swirl, feeling nothing. Not guilt, not panic, just distance. When I checked again that evening, the boxes were gone. So was Cassie. The last clip showed her being picked up by someone, maybe a friend, maybe my dad. I didn't rewind it. I didn't analyze it. I just closed the app. And for the first time in a very long while, I felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Just a quiet, steady relief, like stepping out of a room that had been too loud for too long. By Monday, the storm arrived. Missed calls, voicemails, texts that started polite and curdled fast. My mom texted first. "This isn't funny, Laverne. Cassie is extremely upset and confused. You need to call me back." My dad followed. "You made your sister wait outside. You better have a good explanation." Then Cassie. "What is wrong with you? I stood outside for an hour like an idiot. You couldn't even send a text. What kind of sister does that?" I read them all. I didn't respond. Because the longer I sat with it, the clearer it became. This wasn't about the apartment. It never had been. It was about access. They were angry because I hadn't shown up on cue, because the system they relied on, the one where I absorbed consequences so no one else had to, had glitched. At work that week, something strange happened. I was calm, focused, productive, like someone had unplugged a background noise I hadn't realized was draining me. While my phone lit up with messages I didn't answer, I finished tasks early. I laughed with a coworker. I went for a walk on my lunch break without checking my screen every 5 seconds. But the pressure kept coming. Tuesday, my mom left a voicemail through tears. "I just don't understand why you're doing this. Cassie needed you. You know how hard things have been for her." Wednesday, Cassie sent a screenshot of a hotel booking. "Guess I'll just spend my rent money on this then, since some people can't be bothered to answer." Thursday, my dad sent a long message, the kind that pretends to be calm but carries judgment like a blade. "You've always been the responsible one. That's why we trusted you with this. Honestly, I expected more from you." That one landed differently. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed what I'd already realized. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a utility. Reliable, replaceable, expected to function without complaint. So I did the most responsible thing I could think of. I started documenting everything. Every message, every voicemail, every dollar. I pulled bank statements going back 2 years. Cassie's overdraft fees I'd quietly covered. The insurance payment my dad promised to reimburse next month. Groceries, emergency transfers, car repairs. Little amounts that added up to something massive when laid out in black and white. I built a spreadsheet line by line. It was exhausting and strangely cathartic. For the first time, I wasn't absorbing the chaos. I was labeling it, measuring it, treating it like a problem instead of a personality trait I was expected to manage. That Friday, I sent one email. Just one. I CC'd my mom, my dad, and Cassie. The subject line was painfully neutral. Cassie's living situation. The body was polite, formal, almost cold. I explained that I had moved out of the apartment weeks earlier, that the lease was ending, that it was no longer my residence, and I wasn't responsible for anyone attempting to access it. Then I attached the spreadsheet, and I ended with one sentence that changed everything. Going forward, I will no longer be able to assist with unplanned housing arrangements or emergency funding. I hit send, and the silence that followed was louder than any argument. No calls that night, no texts the next day, not even a passive-aggressive meme from Aunt Isla. It was like I'd spoken a language they didn't understand. Not anger, not defensiveness, just boundaries. But it wasn't over. Because when silence doesn't work, families like mine escalate. And Sunday was when they showed up. Again. Sunday morning arrived without warning, like the calm before something you don't yet know is about to explode. I followed my usual routine. Same coffee mug, same corner cafe, same quiet walk back to my car with a cinnamon roll folded into a paper bag. For a moment, it felt like the world had accepted my boundary without a fight. Then my phone buzzed. Cassie. I muted it. It buzzed again. Mom, then Dad. 3 names I'd learned to associate with urgency, never curiosity. I stepped outside this cafe and finally opened the group thread. The first message wasn't text, it was a photo. My old apartment building. Cassie stood in front of it, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. My mom was beside her, posture stiff, arms folded so tightly it looked like she was hugging herself. My dad stood slightly apart, face tight, like he'd already decided he was annoyed. Below the photo, Cassie had typed, "We're here." My heart stuttered. They didn't think I was avoiding them. They thought I was inside. 5 minutes later, another photo came through. A cardboard box on the sidewalk, labeled toiletries in black marker. Then a message from my mom. Well, wait. That's when it hit me. They weren't leaving. They were staging a sit-in, a silent demand that I appear, unlock the door, and resume my position as problem solver. I got in my car. I didn't drive toward them. I drove to a quiet parking lot 2 blocks away, tucked behind a row of hedges, and turned off the engine. From there, I could see the building clearly without being seen. I sat, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was deciding whether I needed to say anything at all. About an hour later, my dad peeled away from the group. I watched him pace the sidewalk with his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand chopping the air in those sharp, controlled gestures he used when he was angry, but pretending to be calm. I rolled my window down, just enough to hear fragments of his voice carried on the spring breeze. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. This wasn't a check-in, this was damage control. He turned back toward the building. Cassie was still sitting on one of the boxes, legs crossed, phone resting in her lap, scanning the sidewalk like she expected me to materialize out of thin air. My mom stood beside her, unmoving. No one spoke. I wondered how long they'd already been there, how long they were willing to wait, how confident they were that I would eventually cave. Because I always had, until now. Watching them from that distance felt strange, like observing my family through glass. I saw the dynamic clearly for the first time. 3 adults performing patience and sacrifice outside an apartment that didn't belong to any of us anymore. It was theater. Around 2 p.m., a neighbor stepped outside with a dog on a leash. She paused, clearly curious about the boxes, the tension, the silent standoff. My mom straightened. Cassie stood up quickly, smoothing her clothes like she'd been caught doing something embarrassing. My dad smiled. The neighbor didn't linger. She nodded and walked on. But the moment she was out of sight, Cassie's phone buzzed again. Everyone here thinks we're crazy. Just let us in already. Then another text, sharp and deliberate. You're being cruel, Laverne. Seriously, who does this to their family? I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed something. Not to send, just to save before it slipped away. They don't think you're a person. They think you're a service. They forgot to tip. The clarity was almost painful. I opened my banking app next. Scrolled through recurring charges I'd stopped noticing months ago. Subscriptions in my name but used by them. grocery cards linked to my account, insurance payments my dad said he'd get around to. It wasn't about the money. It was about the assumption. At 3:13 p.m., Cassie called again. I let it ring once before silencing it. Then a text came through that made my stomach tighten, not because it was loud, but because it was quiet. You're going to regret this. Not you're hurting me, not please talk to us. Just a warning. And suddenly everything clicked. They weren't there because they missed me. They were there because I'd stopped being useful. 20 minutes later, I saw my dad open the trunk of the car. One by one, the boxes went back in. Cassie didn't help. She stood there, arms slack at her sides, face twisted into something that might have looked like heartbreak to a stranger. My mom climbed into the front seat without a word. Cassie lingered the longest. She took one last look at the building, like it had personally betrayed her, then climbed into the back seat. The car idled for a moment before pulling away. I stayed where I was. When I finally drove home, my home, the one no one had ever visited, I stood inside the doorway for a long time. The air smelled like basil. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor. No boxes, no guilt, no spare room waiting to be claimed. But the fallout had only just begun. By Monday, extended family started reaching out. Aunt Isla, Uncle Brian, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Each message some version of the same thing. Can we talk? Just want to understand. Your mom's really upset. Cassie had clearly gone on a campaign tour, painting me as the cold-hearted sister who tricked her into homelessness. Then came the message that shifted something inside me for good. From my mother, if you don't fix this, you're going to split the whole family in two. I hope you're proud. I stared at it for a long time. Not we should talk, not what happened. Just blame, dropped like a gavel. And the realization that followed was heavier than the words themselves. She truly believed it. She believed the family's unity rested entirely on me bending, again, until everyone else was comfortable. That night I didn't sleep much. I lay awake replaying years of small rescues that had felt insignificant at the time. The bad sublease I'd helped Cassie escape. The emergency transfers. The snowstorm drive to fix a heater in their cabin. All the can you just favors that added up to a life rearranged around other people's convenience. By morning I wasn't angry. I was done, and I knew exactly what I needed to do next. By the time morning came, the decision felt settled in my body. Not sharp, not emotional, just final. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed back at me like it was waiting. I wasn't angry enough to rant and not hurt enough to plead. That was important. I needed what I said next to be clean. I drafted one last message. No sarcasm, no accusations, no raised voice disguised as punctuation. I sent it to my parents, Cassie, and the few relatives who had reached out to understand. It read, "Hi everyone. I've taken some time to think about everything that's happened over the past few weeks, and I want to clarify a few things and set expectations moving forward. I moved out of my old apartment in early April. No one consulted me about Cassie moving in. I was informed after the decision had already been made. When I didn't comply, I was met with silence, guilt, and eventually public pressure. What happened at the apartment was not a prank or a punishment. It was the natural result of a family that has grown comfortable treating me as a backup plan. Over the past 2 years, I've financially contributed over $9,000 to various family expenses. I've never asked for repayment, and I've never held it over anyone's head. From this point forward, I will not be covering family expenses, hosting housing arrangements, or acting as an emergency contact for situations I had no say in creating. This is not done in anger. It's done out of self-respect. I'm 29, and I deserve a life of my own. I'm open to honest conversations, not guilt trips, not lectures. Otherwise, I wish everyone well. Laverne. I read it twice. Then I hit send and turned my phone off. There was no dramatic aftermath, no immediate implosion, no instant relief, just a strange stillness, like standing in a room after the music stops. I made breakfast. I watered the basil plant. I cleaned my apartment while music played at full volume. No interruptions, no sudden demands. That week, the silence was deafening. No replies, no apologies, no arguments. It took 5 days before someone cracked. It was Aunt Isla. Her text was short and unmistakably hers. Read your message, proud of you. If they want to martyr, they can build a statue. I laughed, harder than I expected. Then I cried, just a little. Eventually, the responses did come. My mom sent a long email full of soft language and zero accountability. She talked about hard seasons and how I'd always been the strong one. I didn't reply. My dad left a voicemail that started with, "I just don't get what you're trying to prove," and ended with, "This isn't how we raised you." I deleted it. Cassie went quiet. No texts, no subtweets, no dramatic exit posts, just silence. And somehow, that said more than any tantrum ever had. Weeks passed. I slept better, ate better, went out with friends without that tightness in my chest, waiting for the next crisis to hijack my plans. I stopped checking my phone like it was a ticking bomb. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I got a letter in the mail. A real one, handwritten, from Cassie. It was short. No excuses, no dramatics. Laverne, you made your point loud and clear. I didn't see it before, but I do now. I think I wanted a soft landing more than I wanted to grow up. That wasn't your responsibility. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Cassie. I sat with the letter for a long time. I didn't frame it, I didn't post it, I didn't reply. But I didn't throw it away either, because maybe something had shifted. Months went by. I saw my parents less. I stayed no contact with Cassie, not out of punishment, just space. The kind of space I never realized I was allowed to claim. Then one day, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. It was the leasing office from my old building. They told me someone had listed me as a reference on a rental application, but something about it seemed off. They wanted to confirm. I asked for the applicant's name. "Cassie Rutledge," the woman said. I paused. Then I told her the truth. "That's my sister. I wouldn't recommend using my name." And that was it. That night, I made dinner. I played jazz. I lit a candle and opened a new book. The apartment was quiet, still mine. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. It already had. And I had stepped out of the way,